Welcome to French Studies at Durham. My name's Simon McKinnon and I'm one of the staff in the French department. I teach language in final year and I also teach beginners French in the first year, and I teach French interpreting in the final year as well, which is an option that students can take. I'm going to speak for about 10-15 minutes, just giving you an overview of what French at Durham involves. I've got some slides I can show you as well. Then Sasha, who's one of our students, she's a final year student, but she'll tell you all about herself in a few minutes, I think. So she'll speak when I come to the end. Okay, so first of all, why come to Durham? And I think that Tom Wynne in the general talk probably gave you a lot of things to think about in terms of why it's a good idea to come to Durham. I'm going to say a little bit just more specifically about French and why I think it's a good option for you to study here. And then hopefully Sasha will have lots of good ideas from a student perspective, and I think that's probably what you're more interested in hearing really, but certainly from a student perspective of why Durham's a good option. So first of all, we're ranked 4th in the Times and 6th in the Complete University Guide, so we're in the top 10. It's one of the best places to study French in the country, yeah? That's specifically about French rather than modern languages. So we've got a good reputation. You'd be being taught by internationally renowned academics. So you'll be studying, particularly in final year, things that are cutting edge, and the research that our staff does in relation to French studies is cutting edge. So you'll be working with the top people in a particular field, a particular specialism, as part of your own studies. And all of our staff teach. They don't necessarily all teach at the same time, so some might be on research leave at a particular moment, but all of our research active staff do actually teach, and they will be teaching you, obviously, if you select their modules. So there is a strong commitment in Durham to both research and to teaching. So we value both, and we think both are really, really important. We think that, so some universities are essentially, a lot of the focus is just on research, and some universities, a lot of the focus is just on teaching. Here in Durham, we think that we've got quite a nice mix. And so we use all of the research that our researchers or teachers are carrying out. We use that in the teaching, in the design of our courses, so that we're sharing that with you. You be part of that in some way or another. You know already that it's a collegiate university. That's a big thing in Durham. I'm sure Tom talked about that. That's a big reason for lots of people coming to Durham. By that I mean that that students all live in a college, or are certainly in the first year, and then afterwards they're associated with a college and may live in a college, and that they make lots of friends in their colleges. So as well as studying French, as well as studying modern languages, you'll be mixing with people who aren't just studying your subject. So you're getting quite a broad education because you'll be mixing with people who are studying history or physics or other things in your college, and then you'll be coming also into the department, into the modern languages department, to mix with modern linguists, people who are studying French and other languages as well. It's a beautiful place. You're lucky to come when it's nice and sunny. So do have a good look around Durham. It's a nice place to study. And maybe Sasha's, I think you're going to talk a little bit about your trips in Scotland, aren't you? Yeah? Yeah. So we're quite nicely situated geographically as well. I'm sure Tom and other people have told you this in the colleges. Not too far from London. We're not too far from, it's easy to get to London on the train, up to Scotland, across to Newcastle, and there's plenty to do here in Durham as well. In terms of our French studies program, it's quite broad. And again, we think that there's quite a nice mix in Durham between language study, so studying the language itself, being able to write and speak in French at a very, very high level, and also to be able to understand French. So we put quite a lot of emphasis on language study, but we also put a lot of emphasis on cultural study. We think that the two go hand in hand, we think that the best way to study languages is to study language and culture together. And that gives you, certainly as a language teacher, I know that gives you a very a rich understanding of language use. You're using language in a very, very specific, with a very specific context and a good understanding of the culture that goes behind the language. In final year, you can study, so you would study culture all the way through, and I'm going to give you some information about what you can do in each of the years in a few minutes here on other slides. But just to emphasize this fact that we do put quite a lot of emphasis on language, in final year you can study also as one of your modules, one of the subjects that you study. You can study translation or you can study interpreting as well. There was no translation module, I think, in your year, but by the time that you come to final year, that should be an option for you. And certainly, as I say, I teach interpreting, so I'll say more about that later, but the kind of interpreting we do here in Durham is very high-level interpreting, so it's conference interpreting, the kind of interpreting that takes place in the United Nations, in the European Parliament, in the Council of Europe, that kind of thing, at the highest level. And we do have lots of students who've gone on to, after Durham, they've done a master's course in interpreting elsewhere, and then they've gone on to jobs in these institutions. So we put a lot of emphasis on language, but as I say, we put a lot of emphasis on the study of culture. Often that's through literature, but it's not just literature. So in French, we offer, as well as the study of a broad range of literary periods and genre, we also encourage our students to study film, theatre, and lots of other cultural artifacts. Yeah, so it's not just about books. So most of our students study on the first bullet point there, the BA in Modern Languages and Cultures, but you can study French through other degree programs. So you can study French as part of liberal arts. So that's a different degree program, but we do have students, and even if you're on the BA in Modern Languages and Cultures, you'll be studying alongside in the same class as students in liberal arts. And then also we have students who take degrees in modern languages and history and a few other degrees like that. You can do economics with French as well, I think, yeah. The number of modules taken in French each year, so modules like a course, a subject that you study, a specific subject, like a period in literature, or one module would be your French language module. So you study 6 modules in each of the years, and the number of modules you do in French is quite flexible, actually, and it depends on which degree program you're studying. So obviously, if you study history in French, then you have to do some history modules and some French modules, and 3-3 is a very common balance, so 3 modules in French and 3 modules in history. But if you study, say, modern languages, then you can either just study French, or you can study French with another language. So that could be French with another A-level language that you've studied, or you could take a language up ab initio as a beginner, yeah, from the beginning, without any knowledge of that language at all. And so again, you can do, for example, 3 modules in French and 3 modules in another language, or you can do 2 modules in French and 4 in the other language, or 4 in French and 2 in the other language. Yeah, so there's we're quite open to a range of different possibilities, but you must study the core language plus another module. So whatever you do, if you studied French, you would need to study the French core language module, which is the study of the language, so writing, speaking, and listening in French, and then another module, which would be a cultural module. and you need to do that all the way through the degree. So if you study French, you must do at least 2 modules. So 2 of the 6 subjects that you study must be in French. Or you can do more, yeah, you could do all 6 in French if you wanted, but just so that you have an idea. If you do something like a beginner's language, then that's usually, certainly in French, it's usually considered to be a double module. So if you study, say, Spanish A level, but you're here because you want to find out if you could study French as a beginner, then yes, you can do that, but it's a double module, so you would do 3 modules in French. You do effectively, so it's like the beginner's French module, which is 2 modules, and then another cultural module. Likewise with your other languages. Okay, yeah?
Is the cultural model taught in French?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. So if you do beginner's French...
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so the cultural module is something like the study... I've got some examples coming up on another slide, so that probably will help you. But the cultural module is something like the study of literature. Yeah, so you might study a number of different books. Or it might be the study of cinema, so the study of a number of different films. Or some of them are mixed, where you study books and films at the same time. Now, if you, in the first year, if you study beginner's French, then obviously your French isn't all that good, yeah, because you're a complete beginner. So you would certainly study your cultural module in English, reading books in translation at the start. But for the rest, then some of our modules are taught entirely in French and assessed entirely in French, and other modules are taught in English with the assessment in English. And so that's quite good because you've got a choice of modules. It allows students to decide, well, I want to do everything in French, or I want to do some things in French but not other things. Yeah, so you can decide to do a mix of different languages of study. Does that answer your question? Okay, yeah. So I think I've got some examples here. So here's the number of languages you can study, which is a big question for some people. So in Durham, essentially, you study either 1 language or 2 languages. You can actually study a 3rd language, but only in the 1st and 2nd year, and then beyond that, you need to make a choice as to which 2 languages you want to take into final year. Now, we moved to this system a while back, I think certainly before the pandemic, a little while ago, yeah? Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Because we found that students who were studying 3 languages in final year weren't doing as well as we would like them to do. It was a bit much of a spread to study 3 languages right through into final year. So we found that students did better and had a better knowledge of all of the languages that they studied, including French, by just studying 2.
So what level of proficiency, if when they drop that third language, what level of proficiency are they at when they have to make that decision?
It depends which language they drop. So they could say, take beginner's Arabic in first year with 2 A-level languages, and then they drop one of the A-level languages, in which case they'd have a very high proficiency because they'd have done A-level plus 2 years of university study. But they might decide to drop the Arabic, which they only started as a beginner. Now, for our beginners' languages, and this is for all of them, but it's certainly true for French, and it's quite impressive, I think, that if you do beginners French with us, we get you, it's hard work, yeah? You get quite a few contact hours, and we get you from 0 to GCSE in 1 year, and then in the 2nd year, you get from GCSE to post-A level, so past the A level in the 2nd year. So it's very intense, but we found that it's not actually all that difficult because students are already really proficient in 1 language. We don't have to spend a lot of time like you might in school explaining what the grammar is, what a noun is, or how a sentence is broken up and what a tense is. We can assume that students know that already, and it's just a question of helping them to adapt skills that they've got already in their other languages for the study of French as a beginner. And that's the same in Spanish or in Italian or in any of the other languages. It's quite intense, but quite exciting too. And obviously you're working a lot of the time with the same teachers and with the same smallish group usually, certainly in French. And so it's a good way to build good rapport with your fellow students and with the teachers. So students like that a lot, I think. And I don't think that was available for you, Sasha, in the first year. Was it beginner's French? Or you had A-level anyway, I guess, yeah. Okay, so an example of what students might study. So these are the modules or the subjects that students do with us. In the first year, you do core language. So that's one module where you study writing and reading and listening and speaking, essentially, yeah, and also interacting, obviously. And you can do that either post-A level or beginner's level. And then the cultural modules. So you have to do 2 modules. You must do this one, and then you choose from these ones here. So by cultural modules, we mean things like there's a module called Reading French Literature, and that gives you an overview of some core texts in French literature. The Invention of France is looking at some literary works and some other cultural works like film, etc., but thinking of that in a very specific way linked to the whole idea of what France is. Yeah, so looking specifically at Franco-French, yeah? French cultural items from France. And then this one's very similar, Society and its Outsiders in Modern France, and that's the module in our first year. So there's a choice of 3, yeah, and they're both really kind of giving you an overview in one way or another, but this one is taught and assessed in French. So that's the one that you do if you wanted to do everything in French in your first year. So the second year modules, just the same for the core language. So you continue with the core language, building your skills, and then you get a bit more choice with the cultural modules that you can study. So I'll just give you the opportunity to read them yourselves to see if they're the kinds of things that you're interested in. And again, you can ask me questions either now or at the end, or you can ask Sasha which modules she studied. At the end, yeah? In the second year, so it's 6 altogether as well. So like if you study 3 in French, for example, yeah, you do the core language plus 2 of those. Or you could just do 2, so you could do core language plus 1 of those. Or you could do even more, yeah, so you could do core language plus more.
And half if you're doing joint ones?
If you do, so like with another language, yeah? Or history. You get quite a lot of flexibility, so you would, like 3 3s, the obvious thing to do, but you can do 2 4, as long as you do core language in French, in the French part of your degree, as long as you do the core language plus 1 other. Then you do your third year abroad. So in Durham, we do years 1 and 2 here, third year abroad, and then you come back for your final year. I know it's different in some other universities. They do the second year abroad. Here we do the third year abroad. And you do effectively, I think it's 16 months, isn't it? Because most students actually leave for their year abroad as soon as they finish second year. And then they don't come back to the UK. Sorry, parents, but it's what most students do, yeah? And then they don't come back to the UK until the October, so just as they're ready to go back to university. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it is what most students do. And we offer enormous flexibility in the year abroad. Certainly this is like a big, if you like, selling point for coming to Durham, the year abroad, because of the flexibility that we offer. So I know that in some universities, all the students go to the same partner university somewhere, and they study there. In Durham, we like to say that students can do whatever they like, more or less, yeah? So take that with a caveat, yeah? You can do more or less whatever you like during your year abroad, provided that we sign it off, yeah? We say that we think that whatever you're going to do is both educationally and also educationally beneficial generally, but also beneficial for your French. So obviously you have to go to somewhere where they speak French or they use French. And also it would have to be something that was safe and that we were really happy that where you were going was somewhere that was safe. So that can be all kinds of things. We will help you if you want to be a language assistant in a school, or if you want to study in a French university, a French-speaking university, that should say, because in fact a lot of our partner universities are in Belgium. But we do have them in French as well, but we don't just have them in France. So we'll definitely help you with these things. Sasha's probably best to talk about this afterwards if you would talk a little bit about that. But I think students help each other find work placements. So our students do all kinds of things abroad, like they work for banks, they work for real estate agencies in Paris, they work for lawyers, etc. But that's usually things that students fix up themselves, often picking up on posts that students previously have had. Now, we can offer a little bit of assistance with that. We help put students in touch with each other. But obviously, these are the two things that we officially have to help you with. But because it's so open and wide and we're happy for students to do more or less anything. Some just go and work in a bike shop. I had a student spend his whole year abroad in a bike shop in like the south of France, which he thought was great, yeah. And certainly his French was fantastic when he came back. But that's the kind of thing that you do have to do a little bit of the work yourself there. We can't actually fix that up for you. We're not like an employment exchange.
If you're studying two languages, can you split that year into two different zones?
Absolutely, yeah. So you have to do, I think it's 4 months, isn't it? Yeah. So you have to do 4 months officially in each of the countries where you're studying a language of. But you would normally split that, and students do a whole range of different things. So, for example, some students might spend 4 months in Paris on a work placement. They might then spend, if they do French and Spanish, say, yeah, 4 months in Paris on a work placement. Then they might spend the next period of time in Latin America. And then they might come back in order to take up what used to be an Erasmus placement in a French university, yeah, if you can fit that all in for the second semester. So that you can like shape that the way that you want, but you do have to go to both countries, and you do have to spend a minimum of 4 months in each country.
If you study in a French university, how does the payment work? Is it a reciprocal arrangement with Durham?
So that is currently sort of up in the air a little bit because of Erasmus. So are you talking about the payment to the university, or
yes,
like the grant that you get? Yeah. So you pay.
French university.
No, you pay a fraction of the student fee to Durham, because we're still responsible for students and we keep in touch, and you have to do work. You have to do a study project, etc. But it's not the full tuition fee for that year. Is that the answer to your question? Yeah. Okay, and did you have a question, one of you? No? Already answered. Good. Anything else? Maybe you could ask Sasha some. She'd probably be able to tell you, because she's just so she's a final year student now, and has been abroad relatively recently, so she'll be able to tell you how it works from the student's perspective, I think. When you come back in the final year, you get much more choice. So these are the modules that are available. You also study, as you'll see on the next, I'll put this up now and then come back to this slide, but you'll see that you study your dissertation in final year. So all students do a dissertation, and that's where you're working one-to-one closely with someone on quite a specialized topic, something that would normally be related to that person's research, but certainly should be related to your own interests. So you'll have hopefully built up some interests in the course of your studies at Durham, and you want to take that further in your final year with the dissertation. And then alongside the dissertation, you don't, if you study, say, French and Spanish again, you don't have to do your dissertation in French. Yes, you just do one dissertation, and it's in one of the if you study another language, it could be in the other language. It doesn't have to be in French.
Do they have to be interconnected? So do you have to like reference your other language?
No, you don't have to, but it's nice if you can do that, yeah?
Is it written in French or English?
It's written in English. When you're abroad, though, you write a thing called a Target Language Research Project, which is like a mini dissertation, and you do that for each language, and you write that a very long essay in French or in the target language. So you do get the opportunity to write an extensive research piece in French. So as well as your dissertation, you will study the core language again, and then you can choose from these modules. So there's more choice, I think, in the final year. So as you can see, the modules in the first year, there's less choice, and they tend to be more general, and with offering people a bit of an overview of cultural studies in French. And then by final year, you're applying some of the skills that you've developed studying things more generally to something very much more specific. Because there's more modules, then the chances are the groups will be smaller. Now, you can't guarantee that, obviously, because everybody might choose the same module. So if they did, then the groups would be bigger. But logically speaking, usually the groups are smaller for each module in the final year. Mm-hmm. If there are only 2 people, 2's like very small. So if I'm not sure, I don't know. I've got to be honest, yeah, I really don't know if whether the module would run if nobody signed up for it. But there's no kind of rule that says it hasn't got to, yeah. And that might not necessarily, it's not necessarily like a finance thing either. I'm just thinking, because, especially at university, students learn as much from each other as they do from their teachers, then as an educationalist, I would be concerned about something where there are only 2 students studying something, because there's not going to be much of a chance for them to interact with lots of other students on that topic. There's no rule, I don't think, that says it wouldn't have to run.
As you go through year 1, 2, and then 1 year, roughly how big are the average groups?
How big are the groups? I think, so in language, they're about 12 to 15 students for the written class, and fewer than that, about 10, is it, or fewer? 10? 8 or something for the oral class. And then in the cultural modules, so there are big lectures with everybody in a lecture room, and then there are seminars that run alongside the lectures, and I think the seminars are about 12, are they? Something like that. So 12 students in a much smaller room than this, but again, it's important for students to be working together. So they give presentations to each other, they do a lot of group work. I think a big thing, certainly in the language teaching, as I'm a language teacher, obviously, a very big thing I should stress about our teaching methodology in Durham is student group work. So the students do an awful lot of work in language classes, working with each other, obviously with the teacher present and guiding what they're doing, setting them tasks, but very much interacting with each other. And I think that students find that, and employers also find that a big plus, because when students leave Durham, they've got the confidence of having worked all the time very easily in teams, yeah, with other groups of students, yeah.
Regarding the year abroad, so you're doing French and Arabic.
Yeah.
You spend that whole year in French and Arabic in the country.
Yeah. So you would spend, for Arabic currently, I think you can find this out for sure in the Arabic talk, yeah. But I think currently for Arabic, students have to go to a particular language school in Jordan, I think it is it? Yeah. So you would have to fit in your French year abroad around the time that you spend in the Arabic-speaking country. Some students also go to Morocco, I think, for things that they fixed up themselves, where they can get a bit of French and a bit of Arabic. But students don't find it difficult to be able to fit in going to a French-speaking country and an Arabic-speaking country at the same time. Does that answer your question? Good. Okay, now I think that's where I come to the end after. So we've seen the thing about the dissertation. Or just quickly about careers, and then you can do your talk. So what kinds of careers do our students go on to do? Well, you'll know, because I'm sure you've done the research already, that Durham is one of the best places to come in terms of being assured of getting a good job afterwards, and that's regardless of the degree that you do here. Our students do all kinds of things. So some of the careers they do, like I said, some of my students have gone on to be interpreters. Lots go on to be translators, but you don't have to be an interpreter or translator because you study languages. So some use their languages, some don't. I think the vast majority of students do typical graduate jobs that you would do regardless of the degree that you study in the first place. But studying a language does give you many pluses. So lots of employers are looking for students who've got language skills specifically, but especially communication skills. The ability to be able to communicate confidently, fluently, and at ease with other people, and that's definitely a big plus. So our students don't normally find it difficult to get a good job. They're highly employable. We get some students who go on to further study, and then some do work in things that are in the language sector, translation, interpreting, things working in museums or in the cultural sector, in theatre and in literature, that kind of thing. So I'll pass you over to Sasha now, and then you can ask some questions.
Hi. And I started with French and German. I started German at this year. I did that for 2 years, went on my year abroad in both countries, and then for my final year, because I wanted to do a bigger dissertation, I decided to stick to French and drop the German side. So I'm going to go over quickly sort of what I know most about the French department and studying French at Durham, some of the skills I've gained, and some of the challenges as well. So I think this has been said in both talks. One of the best things about French is like the wide range of modules, subjects, and also personally I've written about French learning underground rap and also about plagiarism and reading French. So literally 2 hours apart. You really go to what you want. I have some friends who prefer the language side of it. They've done interpreting in their last year, and they've done more language-based modules. And I have some friends who love literature or cinema. You can also choose any sort of, you can go from legal to modern. So it's really you can decide your own degree and what you're interested in. And especially after that first year with the foundations, you can then really kind of figure out what you like and you really go into that. And that's something that's really nice. It feels like it's your degree. It's, passing 2 years. Another aspect I really like, and I think most language students with the degree, is year abroad. It is probably one of my favourite years at Durham. It comes with its own set of challenges, but what's so amazing is all that language, all those oral lessons and grammar lessons you've been sitting in for years and years, and you can finally put it into use for more than 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or when you're on holiday or if you're doing an exchange. You actually have 6 months of living in that country and having to apply it. And that is the best feeling when you come out of it on the other end and you're like, oh, I can get through a conversation in French without having to translate it from English, and that's such a good feeling. I think also, with that year abroad, I really felt like the university had my back, so I actually did an internship in Paris, and then decided that 3 months of that, decided that I was going to do a different internship, was able to finish the first one, start the second one, and then I studied in Germany. And throughout all of that process, you have to there with me. You're also writing these target language projects, so you're also in contact with academic staff as well. And those projects are really fun because you can do them on anything. So my German one, I wrote about World War I building, and my French one, that was the essay on rap. And the academic staff are really there with you, and they're also really interested in what you're doing. It's a bit different from their sort of research as well. I think, again, studying French is hard. There's a lot of exceptions. The grammar isn't always so straightforward. The spelling doesn't always make there is a lot of support there for you, especially in those first years and throughout as well. I think the other thing that's great about languages is as students we have a massive community because we're all in the same boat and also we're all going on year abroad. So everyone, you get to know other people in the course very quickly, especially the ab initio. I think my German ab initio group, we have a group chat with some really good friends. We go to the pub together and stuff like that. You know, it goes beyond just your lessons, which is really nice about the language department. A lot of people want to go, oh, languages for your own friends. Which is quite nice as well. I think, again, you know, coming out of these 4 years, I think one of the skills I got was communication. I would have never done this in first year. I would be super scared to come up here and talk to you guys about it. But I think the year abroad and having to discuss ideas, in seminars, you know, gives you the confidence that's really, really useful. I think critical thinking, even in our oral and our grammar classes, you know, we learn the content, but we learn it in the context of critical thinking. So a lot of our oral lessons will be based around a new news article or something that's happening in current affairs, and you have to express opinion instead of just, you know, the correct grammar sentence. I think, you know, also just cultural sensitivity and adaptability. I think, you know, going into France, I know a little bit about France, but we find and was hit with this like massive cultural like, okay, they do very differently to us. And that's something that you learn year abroad, but you also learn through the cultural modules. They really help you understand why France is like it is where it is today. And so yeah, I think